We're going to start a little bit late today because people are slow to trickle in.
I was already here, by the way.
I saw your backpack. You're good.
Okay, cool.
That light is going to drive me nuts.
This might just stop that.
Beautiful.
You know, I got pulled over for running a scooter in the quarter mile, but I got pulled over at the end of the quarter mile, so I was like, what's the point?
It's already past the end.
When? What? Today?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
I really got pulled over, and I was just thinking in my head, this is the end of the quarter mile.
Did they give you like a lecture?
It was a chick. She was like, you can't ride your scooter. There's like no one. It's not really open.
Yeah, that's like.
Yeah, that's a weird time to do it, too.
It's very annoying. I get that.
I got pulled over once on my bicycle for when I was cutting across OSU's campus, which is lots of places where you can't ride your bike there either. And this cop pulls me over and starts giving me the speech about how I'm going too fast and it's unsafe because there are walkers and stuff. And that's all technically true. And then he was like, where are you trying to get? And I was like, I teach here and I'm just running really late for class. So, and he was like, just get the fuck out of here. I was very grateful. Russell, Darren, Sam, thank you. My God, it's Friday already. Matt, thank you. Matt Colton, there you are. Morning. Anthony, Alex is here. Both Alexes are here. Matt Talaka. Owen's here. Zach is here. Justin and Michael. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cool. Gianna, Emily, thank you. And Emily. All right, it's 8:05. Let's do it. I think I'm going to dive straight into the reading today. Today we are talking about juxtaposition, which I think is probably one of the trickier things to talk about. Let me find one second. And if you've got a device out, I'm just going to ask you to put it away before we start to rip out some of that. Okay. First up today is I'm not going to read you a poem. I'm going to read you a short story. Very, very, very short story. This is called The Custodian. It's by a guy named Brian Hinshaw. It won, there's like a short story contest, best flash fiction in the world. This one won it back in like 93. The Custodian. The job would get boring if you didn't mix it up a little. Like this woman in 14A, the nurses called her the Mockingbird. Start any song, and this old lady would sing it through. She couldn't speak, couldn't eat a lick of solid food, but she sang like a house on fire. So for a kick, I would go in there with my mop and such, and I'd prop the door open with a bucket, and I'd get her going. She was best at the songs you'd sing with a group, Oh, Susanna, campfire stuff. And any kind of Christmas song worked good, too. And it always cracked the nurses up if I could get her to do Let It Snow during a heat spell. We'd try to make her take up songs from the radio or some of the old songs with cursing in them, but she would never go for those. Although once I got her to do How Dry I Am while the nurse messed with her catheter. So yesterday, her daughter or maybe granddaughter comes in while 14 and I are part ways into Auld Lang Syne. And the daughter says, oh, like she had interrupted some kind of scintillating conversation. And then she takes a long look at 14A lying there in the gurney with her eyes shut and her curled up hands, taking a cup of kindness yet. And the daughter looks at me the way a girl looks at the end of an old movie. And she says, my God, she says, you're an angel. And now I can't do it anymore. I can hardly step into the room. So I picked this story because, I mean, I think it's fucking great. But I think it exemplifies on a couple levels the literary device we're going to be talking about today, which is juxtaposition. Juxtaposition, very difficult to define. I didn't even bother looking up one. I think functionally, it can be defined as the comparison, or even the coexistence, really, of two or more seemingly incongruous concepts or things. So very broad, very vague, right? Out of the three devices we've talked about this week, juxtaposition, I think, is the one that kind of sits the furthest away from us, behind the most layers of weird distance and abstraction. Not only are we engaging with just concepts, but we're engaging with more than one concept for the purposes of bringing them together. And not only are we comparing them to each other, but we're also purposefully bringing together concepts that don't quite fit with one another for the purposes of creating some kind of profound or literary collision. Which means we have to have a sense of like why each of these things is incongruous, right? And how exactly we're going to bring them together. It's a lot of moving parts. And so juxtaposition is really difficult to explain. But weirdly, it's very easy to sense. It's the t-shirt at a funeral, right? It's like a guy playing chess by himself in the middle of the road. It's a lie that a person tells that makes them look like a hero, but you're the only one who knows the truth. Like, it's things that don't go together, going together. And honestly, I think we can think of juxtaposition as a type of metaphor. It is, in a sense, an act of comparison. The custodian in Brian Hinshaw's piece is being compared to a hero at the end of a movie. The custodian in Brian Hinshaw's piece is being compared to the hero at the end of an old movie when the girl looks at him like that. And the reason he feels shame is because that's not something he can live up to. He's making fun of this woman, right? So now he can't even step into the room. And we feel, I feel like we feel something true at the end of that story where like he can't accept this way this person has looked at him because he knows that it's not on, he knows that if she knew the truth, she would feel differently, right? And now that he's got this comparison that he can't live up to, he's stuck. He can't do the thing anymore. Where did I go? So we can feel the juxtaposition here, and we can feel it generating payoff in the story. And as I was reading it the second time, I was actually thinking there's even more juxtapositions going on here. There's maybe a juxtaposition of class going on here. You've got a custodian who's working for someone who's in the hospital, and he's making fun of her, right? That's like a sort of punching up feeling. You could say that these two classes are sort of juxtaposed against each other. There's a power dynamic there, right? One person, this whole building is made for them and to take care of them, and this guy's just like cleaning the floors, but he has a certain amount of power. All these things could be considered forms of juxtaposition. It's a super loose definition, right? And you can find it almost anywhere if you look enough. So I've been thinking a lot about the right way to carry out an activity for today. And honestly, it hasn't been super easy because I'm not exactly sure how to like get you to manufacture the incongruous. That seems tough. So we're going to have to come at this from a couple different ways in order to try to make these sort of weird collisions that we want. But honestly, before we get into the activity, I kind of want to just stop for a sec and ask, Does anyone have any immediate questions about what exactly juxtaposition is? Because I feel like that would be very legit, and I'm willing to just like kick this idea around for a minute if anybody has questions. Let me double check the stream too. Talk to me, Matt.
Give a definition again, because like I'm just trying to.
Yeah. Let me go to the dictionary this time. So the dictionary says the fact of two things being seen or placed close together with a contrasting effect. So things that are incongruous sort of coming together and existing near one another. And basically juxtaposition is what happens in your brain when you see two things that don't go together, normally going together. Does that work? Okay. Is that a hand mic?
Yeah, what compares that being different from a regular metaphor then?
I think in a regular metaphor, often we're looking for similarities, and it's
Okay.
not. And I would say that I would call juxtaposition a type of metaphor, right? And I would say that a metaphor, you're allowed to find just streamlined similarities and say this thing is like this thing. You know, applause sounds like rain, sounds like ocean waves, sounds like wind and trees. Like those things aren't necessarily. There's no schism there. You're looking for the similarity.
Just take two things that are completely unrelated and put them together.
Kind of, but I think, and
Or just not as related as like in a metaphor.
completely unrelated is hard.
They have to be related somehow to be put together.
Exactly. They're not just, if they are related, they're related in a way that makes them sort of opposed,
Okay.
right? If they were completely related, if they were completely unrelated, then you wouldn't notice any kind of satisfying relationship between the two of them. But there's a kind of energy from the collision of opposing ideas. Justin.
Are we trying to show the divide between the two items that we're putting together? Because I had a teacher in high school who loved to use the word juxtaposition.
Uh-huh.
He used to describe anything between the way a fruit basket is arranged to why she wore orange on Friday. And it wasn't always just the divide between two things or a difference between like.
Mm-hmm.
Are we looking for a difference, or are we highlighting why two things are different?
I think it could be either. I probably wouldn't disagree with any of your, although I have no idea why orange on Fridays would be a juxtaposition, right? But I think she and I would probably agree that it could be either. It's once two things that don't normally go together go together. I think there's a lot of functionality. You can use juxtaposition for a lot of different things. I think is kind of what I'm coming down on. Does that make sense? Yeah, ish. Alex.
Is it kind of like if one thing's opposite is the other's similarity?
Ooh, what do you mean?
Like if you did yoga in an abandoned lot with like a bunch of group of people,
Mm-hmm.
or like
I would call that juxtaposition.
because it's like is usually associated with nature,
Mm-hmm.
but the opposite of an abandoned lot is nature.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they're not immediate opposites, but it like skips a step.
Yeah, things that don't quite fit.
Like this, I guess, like the similarity of like the yoga to nature, but this is its opposite,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like not direct, but it's like.
And even the fact that like when you walk into an abandoned building, you don't expect to find 25 yoga moms. Like even that fact, I think you could call juxtaposition, in that we have a certain set of it has to do with expectations, actually. And I think this might apply to what you were saying about your teacher, is that I think it has a lot to do with what we expect from one thing, what we expect from an abandoned building. Or when we picture 25 yoga moms doing yoga, none of us just like unconsciously put them in an abandoned building. You know what I mean? It has to do with our expectations of things are very, very streamlined, like if I were to tell you to picture 25 yoga moms, you'd probably put them in some kind of room. And a lot of us would probably agree about what that room was, right? It'd be like a weird hard floor, hot yoga room, right? Or something. Or maybe sitting around at a book club. Like there'd be a set of expected outcomes there. And I never told you to put them in a room. Your brain's just doing that all the time. And I think juxtaposition is a sense of play with what those expectations are around things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. No questions from the stream. Do you have other questions about juxtaposition? It's almost like a purposefully unclear idea, but I think the closest I've gotten so far is this thing about expectations. It has to do with what we expect from people. It has to do with what we expect from things. Like, I'm going to save that for later. Okay, so let's take a crack at this writing exercise because I have one. So first, I want you to imagine a place out in the natural world. We've done this a couple times, right? It can be familiar or idealized. You don't have to pick the same one that you've kept picking. I might even challenge you to find a new one. But try to picture this place in the natural world fully. So whether it's a beach or a forest or a canyon, whatever, think about all the details you could put there. Try to let your movie image be complete. And again, notice what feelings come packaged with those images and sensations, right? And we're going to spend just a couple minutes describing it like before. And also like before, try to invite some of this white space into the page where it feels right or where you feel like experimenting. So no word bank, we're just riffing, we're describing this place, look around in your environment and get the details down. We're going to do this for 3 or 4 minutes. It's about 1.5 minutes. About 30 seconds. Okay. So now we have a place established. What we're going to do is we're going to experiment with putting a number of different things in this place that don't fit. And we are also going to start experimenting with character. So, and this is our first crack at it. So if it doesn't feel like it goes well for you, that's totally fine. But for right now, put 2 people in your environment who don't belong there. And also give them a dispute that does not belong there. So you can put 2 men. So I've got a forest, right? You can put 2 men in business suits having a vicious argument about whether or not to sell their company. Or you can put 2 young lovers on the precipice of a breakup. If you find that you're writing down what each thing the arguers say and you're recording dialogue, that's good, that's fine. But if you also find you're a little bit more zoomed out and you're just like describing the headspace of the characters and you're describing the argument from the outside, that's also fine. That's called point of view, and you're going to pick one very naturally, and we don't have to think too hard about which one we land on today. Go with whatever distance comes to you first. And if you can, try to imagine their argument sort of like a movie that you're watching, and that your job is to just record what you see. Your setting that you just spent building will now provide the background, and their dispute will provide the foreground, the plot, the sort of propulsion. And no matter what situation you pick, your questions will remain the same. And by questions, I mean like, so for my example, I'm doing 2 dudes, business suits. They're going to argue about whether or not to sell their company, but they're also like deep in the Adirondacks, right? And so my questions become like, how did they get there? What about their fight has made it so important that they have to hash it out like right here and now? Also, what is it about these people that they're compelled to fight right now? And aren't there more important things to be doing right now if this is where they are? And as I write, I don't necessarily have to answer these questions. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just pointing out that they exist. And you only have to know that they're there. Because, kind of like we talked about the other day, stuff that gets unsaid stuff, when you put it under pressure, can be a sort of fuel inside the engine of your story. So just a couple minutes, write these people in, have them hash out this argument. You don't have to go with the examples that I provided, but if you're a little bit lost for one, I suggest you go for it. We're going to do this for 5 minutes. You can give them names. You can call them man and woman. You can call them guy 1 and guy 2. I might say guy 1 and guy 2. I hate coming up with names. Terrible at it. I'm starting to see how this one requires a little bit more. So we're going to extend it for just a couple more minutes. So we got about 4 or 5 minutes left still. About 30 seconds. Okay. That's hard. I think the thing that didn't work for mine was that I completely forgot that they were I knew that they were in suits and ties, but I forgot to write it down. And so I don't think not until the very, very end. And so I think I missed the mark a little. Okay, this is very interesting. All right. So you have two options now. One, you can keep your setting, keep your argument. If you feel like this argument has good energy, keep fucking going with the argument. I don't care. That totally works. If you think it's working, don't stop. If you're like me and you want to pull back and you want to try again, let's do this. So I want you to keep the same setting, but you're going to put a different person there instead. So forget about the arguers for a second if you're going to go with this. And this time, we're just going to put a single person in our setting. And we're going to try for a different kind of juxtaposition. So you've got this natural setting that you've made, right? Now imagine that this character is looking at the natural setting that you have made, the scene that you have described. Imagine that they're looking at it with a certain amount of interest and that they are really noticing the details that you originally put down. The birds, the trees, whatever. But imagine a certain kind of strangeness in his tone and demeanor. So the challenge is, imagine that this person is noticing the scene you've made with the intensity and energy and enthusiasm of like someone who is deeply patriotic and also a soccer fanatic watching their country win the World Cup for the first time. Okay, so imagine what that person will feel like. A deeply patriotic soccer fan watching their country like beat Germany in the World Cup for the very first time. But the thing that they are noticing is the scene that you have made. Okay? So try to think about how this person would feel, but then apply that to instead your setting. See what happens. About 3.5 minutes. About 10 seconds. Okay, I had a lot more success that time. That was way easier that time. I basically just like pictured my most enthusiastic friend and put him in the woods and just watched him like wig out. So notice, I'm mostly trying to get us to notice these things, right? And like I said, juxtaposition is like one of the hardest ones to figure out because like I kind of tried to illustrate a little bit in the story, the story of the custodian, you can have juxtapositions at any conceivable level. If there is a concept, you can have another concept that juxtaposes it, right? And so it's very difficult then to pin down a definition of juxtaposition that works every time and that feels really concrete. So notice that, or I hope you were able to notice that your story's energy, if it can be called that, comes from certain, even if they're not questions, they're kind of curiosities, like, who is this guy? Why is he that way? It was a guy for me. What is it about this person that makes him behave like this? These juxtapositions, that they are things that can, even if they don't exactly know what the question, even if they don't think to ask these specific questions, they can entice a reader. And those enticements form a bond between the reader and the text, and they make it interesting. And juxtaposition, I kind of just said this. I hope it's becoming clear that this can come from many different places. You could have mismatches in tone. You could have mismatches in setting. Or you can have mismatches in what you would expect characters to be thinking about, right? All of these things work. And often, when you create a juxtaposition in one thing, it sets off a whole interesting set of ripples of other things that are also juxtaposed, right? Because every time you make a weird schism, you're continuing to play with your reader's expectations or your own expectations. And most of what juxtaposition has to do with, I think, is a kind of subverting of expectation. And in fiction, a story can thrive off of these kinds of strangenesses. It makes me think about the example I want to bring in comes from the very first episode of Atlanta. Has anybody seen Atlanta? Does anybody watch Atlanta in here? Oh my God, like best TV show, just like period. It's absolutely my favorite TV show. The very first scene of Atlanta, the very first scene of the first episode is these two guys get into a fight outside of a nightclub, or they're in an argument. They're like in each other's faces because one of them is drunk and he just like stumbled and he knocked the dude's side view mirror off, right? And so now the dude gets out of his car and they're up in each other's face, right? And then one dude's friend comes over and he's standing next to him, and the other dude's friend comes over and the tension is building. And then like one of them lifts his shirt and he's showing that he's got a gun on him. And the other one's like, okay. And he ducks back into his car and he pulls a gun out of the glove box and he's like, fuck, we're fucking even, I guess, now. And so the tension keeps mounting in this argument. And then one of the friends is in the back and he's like, whoa. He stops everyone and he's like, I am getting the weirdest deja vu right now, dude. And he's like, where is the dog with the Texas on it? And they're like, what? And then across the street, there's this dog that goes by and it's got like a weird spot on its side that's kind of in the shape of the state of Texas. And he's like, dude, like I knew that was going to happen. And everyone's like, what the fuck? And then like they go back to fighting. But that moment totally offsets the fight in this really, really strange way. You're like, wow, he really knew that there was going to be a dog with a Texas on it. And it gives the whole fight like this new quality of strangeness. And the show finds these moments all the time where reality just like becomes a little bit off kilter, and it gives a whole new tone to the show. Michael.
I feel like movies do that a lot.
Movies do this a lot, yeah.
Like I know there's an example, like, well, in many movies there'll be like a fight or something, or building tension, then someone's like, wait a minute, what about this? And then they start talking something else, and then all of a sudden they go back to fighting, or something that's a different attitude, or something like that.
Absolutely, yes.
I've seen that a lot in movies and stuff.
I think movies are one of the mediums that does this the most well, honestly.
With, what we're doing now,
Yeah, if you've ever seen a David Lynch anything, do people watch David Lynch movies anymore? Am I dating myself a little? Maybe a little. But every time you watch like a capital AF art film and the movie pulls a move where you're just like, what the fuck is going on right now? There's a good chance there's a good chance that they're just like gunning for a feeling. They're not gunning for you to get it necessarily. They're trying to take your expectations and like throw you a curveball to make you feel a different way, and then they can proceed with the story now that you've been affected by this one feeling. Justin, I saw your hand up too.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, tumbleweed, coming across, like,
Mhm.
gunslingers, like, wait for high
Mhm.
noon. It's kind of like, there's like, you see nothing but their eyes and like the glare of like their hats like shadowing their eyes, and then all of a sudden you just pull back and there's the tumbleweed going across, like, why is that even there? And then all of a sudden it's back to, oh my gosh, they're shooting, what's happening? So,
That totally works. Yes, that totally works because it's like a kind of calmness set against tension, like people about to dive, and it's like, look at the natural world, bitch. Like, you don't matter. Say what?
No, nothing, never mind.
Okay. I like that example quite a bit. Yeah. And this kind of brings us in. I just want to spend the last couple of minutes of this doing discussion. So if you have like a good example of juxtaposition, or this exercise was particularly interesting or a total failure for you, I want to hear from you. I had a lot of fun writing about this guy that was like chewing on the collar of his shirt, like, yes, and he's like looking at like a fern. You know what I mean? That was really fun for me. And so it worked for me. But I kind of set myself up for success because I knew that would be fun and funny to write about. Alex.
I actually had kind of the opposite experience where, like, for the describing my scene from like this super excited person's point of view, it was weird because I had to describe something but not use my own voice, and I would have to remind myself like this person is super excited. Like, it was weird and annoying. And the other time when it was like when I was like describing the people in the scene, I would kind of use the scene to like contrast what they were saying. Like, there's a bright sun, the person's like, oh, there's so much glare on my phone. It's like, and then it would kind of like fight against what they were doing, but like in a still kind of way. And that felt more natural than like describing something in someone else's voice.
I like that. Yeah. Oh man, what movie is this? I'm trying to think. It might be like a Wes Anderson or something. There's some movie that reminds me of where like the opening shot of the movie is like a gorgeous, it's like Zion in Utah or something. Like, it's a gorgeous fucking scene, and that's the first thing you see when the movie opens. Just like this long sustained shot. And then you don't see the person yet, but you just hear, God, this is fucking lame. And it's like a kid, and that's the main character, and that's how it opens. It's like grandeur, and then this kid's just like, and he's a total pissant for like most of the movie. It makes me think about that. Yeah, like you can offset lots of different things, right? Did I see your hand again, Justin?
yeah, I kind of shot myself in the foot because I picked the setting of coral reef.
Oh.
And then you're like, all right, I love what song you do. But then I realized it's kind of ridiculous that like anything that shows up from the modern world at the bottom of the ocean doesn't really belong there.
That's true.
Even a pirate ship doesn't make sense.
And so, did you have to put people having an argument down there?
Yeah, there just wasn't a whole lot of talking.
Okay, fair enough. Mike or Matt, sorry.
So I had two dudes at a beach, but they were like businessmen, and they were gonna open up a ski lodge. And they're like co-owners, but they're debating like where to put it. You know, because I thought, you know, the ski lodge versus, you know, being a beach, would be a good contrast. And then I decided to make their argument where one of them wanted to be like on the mountain, while the other one wanted to be at the base of the mountain.
Oh. So there's like this layer of so they have like radios or something?
Yeah, like.
Or are they just yelling?
Lodges.
Oh, I feel you. Okay.
They're really gonna build it.
Very, very cool. Thank you, Mike.
Funny thing, when you mentioned Wes Anderson, the movie I was talking about was actually Wes Anderson. The movie I was thinking of was actually a Wes Anderson movie.
Which one?
You know when we did those two animated movies?
Isle of Dogs and
Isle of Dogs, I was talking about that one.
Oh, okay.
You ever see that?
I did see Isle of Dogs, yes.
Okay. You know the scene in the beginning when they're like the dogs are about to go fight over something, and they're like, wait a minute. Why don't we not fight over and see what's worth it? And then they realize that they start fighting. Remember the beginning? That's what I was thinking of. Something like that.
I think Wes Anderson's really good at juxtaposition, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that. And there's a lot of juxtaposition even in that movie. It's like an animated movie still.
even in like, this is another great example of it in the many different forms that juxtaposition can take. Even in, I will talk about Wes Anderson all goddamn day, honestly. It's my absolute favorite. But even in like the way that he shoots movies that are really consciously beautiful, you know, like every shot is like symmetrical and has like a very purposeful color palette. I don't know if you've seen Wes Anderson movies, but do yourself a favor, go watch any of them.
He's got a cool style.
But he'll do like a war movie in those tones, and like you almost forget, and it's shot so purposefully and so, with such this kind of like candy filter over it that like you kind of forget that it's a war movie for a lot of it, you know, and then something like really violent and scary happens and you're like, oh fuck, this is really good. Yeah. And so that, I think he gets a lot of energy out of that. It's like he's portraying war in a certain way, you know. Makes me think of Grand Budapest Hotel first, which is just like literally my favorite movie. Alex.
So I don't know if there would be like a difference or like a similarity or whatever, but like what's the relationship between juxtaposition and irony?
I think, you know, I thought about irony a lot when I was doing this. I think that a lot of times those two terms end up being interchangeable. I really do.
All right.
I'm not doing an irony day because I feel like something very similar is being achieved here. I think probably irony is a kind of juxtaposition if I had to really come down on it, because irony usually involves a very purposeful use of a kind of juxtaposition, often to undercut the seriousness of a moment, or to highlight something about society, that sort of thing. And so to me, I think if there was an umbrella term, juxtaposition is probably the umbrella term, and that irony falls somewhere inside of it. Okay, we are technically over time, so I'm going to let y'all go. Just remember to keep listening to that album you've chosen, and taking notes on it when you feel it, and we will talk on Monday. Have a great weekend.